Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on your time zone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Power BI Dev Camp, developing custom visuals with the fantastic Ted Patterson.
Hello everyone, Ted Patterson here. Welcome to Power BI Dev Camp. This is our first session in 2021. And so today we're going to cover developing custom visuals for Power BI. Now, let me first of all point out that we have a place that everybody can go to, which is just https powerbidevcamp.net. If I take a quick trip over to this right here, just to kind of show what we have there. We have basically something that just has a little bit of information about all our sessions. So last year we had 5 sessions. Everyone says that the worst thing that happened in 2020 is we only had 5 sessions instead of 12 for Power BI Dev Camp. But now this is our first 2021 session. And so note that if you go to this particular page right here, which you can get into, here are the links to things like if you'd like to download the slides. There's also going to be some sample code and a tutorial. So once again, we want to kind of put all the links here so you can get to those resources quickly. Now, next thing I want to do is, let's go back here. And what I'm going to do one again, come on, Ted, let's go ahead and start up PowerPoint here. There's also new documentation that the product team has put out. Up until recently, we've had a GitHub repo and a wiki that had all the information, but Microsoft went through a great authoring process to take that and put it, into its official documentation format. If I go back over here and we kind of look at the Power BI visuals documentation, you want to get started. That's what we're going to cover today, but all kinds of issues that you might encounter. So today's session, we're really going to focus on getting up and going with the dev tools. We're not going to hit advanced topics. We're not going to talk if you need to get your visual certified and get it up into the Microsoft App Store. But once again, this documentation is the place to go to start getting that type of information. Okay, now what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of focus on the program for today. So what I want to do is I want to start just by walking through installing the Power BI developer toolset. We have to install a couple pieces of software. If you have worked with Node.js and Visual Studio Code and TypeScript, you'll be right at home. If you're new to Node.js, or TypeScript or Visual Studio Code, there's some learning curves. We're not going to be able to kind of drill down on those topics today. It's kind of assumed knowledge, but once again, that's the tool set you're going to be using. We're going to do things like create the first visual using the tool set. We'll then get into a more abstract discussion about defining visuals with things like data roles and data mappings. We'll talk about adding custom properties to a custom visual. And then we'll hit a couple advanced topics such as implementing highlighting with the selection manager. And then we'll end up with a quick discussion of how to package up your visual for distribution and how you can deploy it to the organizational visuals gallery if you'd like. Okay, now the way that we start out is we install Node.js. And Node.js comes with something called the Node Package Manager, which is a command line utility, NPM. If you've never used that, you're going to be learning it to do this type of development. You need a development environment, and you can use any development environment that you'd like, except for Visual Studio. So Visual Studio and Node.js development don't go very well together. So Visual Studio Code is Microsoft's best and free environment to do this type of development with. So that's what we're going to use. Okay, now we also have to install a Node.js package for the Power BI developer tools, and that gives you a command line utility called PBIVIZ. So you'll be calling things like PBIVIZ start and PBIVIZ package. So once again, it's a command line utility that gets installed when you install the tools. And then before we get going, we're also going to have to install a local self-signed certificate so that we can basically run our project in Visual Studio Code, set up a local web server and debugger, and then be able to test my code right in the Power BI service with a developer visual. Okay, it all sounds great. Okay, so I'm going to kind of leave it to you to go off and install Node.js. There's many different versions that are coming out fairly frequently, so you just need Node.js version 10 or later. And then you go through a setup program. It's pretty easy. It's free. It downloads in just a couple minutes. but installing that on your PC, or, possibly you're working with a Mac, is fairly quick and painless. Then you're going to install Visual Studio Code, and that kind of gives you your dev environment. Okay, now the next thing that we have to do, is we have to install the Visual Studio Dev Tools. Now, the way that we're going to do that is we're going to bring up the command line, for node.js. And if I type in node.js, we don't want this little green thing that says node.js, because that would bring up an engine that we could submit JavaScript to that would execute on the fly. We want the node.js command prompt. So as I open that, and I have one that's a little bit friendlier, I think, and bigger right here. It's not bigger, but let me go ahead and change my defaults just so I don't make you go blind as you're trying to look at my demo here. Okay, one more second. Let me change the font for you, just so you can see what I'm doing a little bit easier. So once we have the Node.js command line open, we're going to say install, npm install. There is a -G because you don't want to install this on a project level basis. You want to install it once for your PC or once for your Mac. And this is a command that is going to run. Now, I already have them installed, so it's not painful, to install over, what you've already installed. But you might find that you don't have the latest version, so you might want to go ahead and run this. And basically, if I put in after Power BI -visuals-tools, if I put in an @latest, it would do, the installation for me. Okay, so I'm not going to wait for that right there, but the idea is that, once you run that, you're going to install the tool set. The very latest, is the Power BI Visual Tools version 3.1.5. So that's the one, that I'm going to be using today.
Hey, Ted, just quickly, do we have any links that we can post in the chat window, please, for the attendees? And if you want to send them to me, separately, and I can post them so you continue, that's okay. We've just got a couple of questions on that because I think folks want to go
ahead and send you those 2 links right here.
Thank you.
And I'll let you I think that you should see them at this point, and then we should be able to get those over to those people.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Now, once we've installed the tools, then from the command line, we have this tool called PBIVIZ.exe. And so when we call PBIVIZ, once again, if I come back over here and we have a PBIVIZ and we go ahead and we run this command, when you run the command and you don't tell it what to do, it kind of shows you a fancy logo, but it then tells you the different options. Now, the one that we care about is new. Now, let's go ahead and create a quick folder, so we can kind of do the quick hello world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and let's go down to DevCamp, and I'll create a quick folder, and this is going to be my demo folder. Okay, now that I've got this demo folder, I'm going to go ahead and grab that path to the demo folder. So let's go back here, to our command line, and inside of the command line, we'll first of all change directory, over to C and then DevCamp, and now my demo folder. Okay, great. And so now we're going to call PBIVIZ new, and then what's the name of my particular project? Let's just call this one Hello World. So as I do that right here, what you're going to see behind the scenes is that it creates a folder and puts a bunch of project files inside there. Now, once we're kind of done building this package, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open that folder with Visual Studio Code. Okay, now, once it's done, kind of the common technique people will use is now they'll change directory and they'll just kind of step into that folder. And then the secret handshake or the keystroke is code space dot. And that basically says open Visual Studio Code and open the project because it says open the current folder. And so what happens now is that, it should open Visual Studio Code, and there is our first project. Now, you can kind of see that you have some folders and you have some top level files. So let's kind of quickly cover, what we've just done there. Now, first of all, I installed the developer tools, PBIVIZ. Now, you can say PBIVIZ -- help, and you can get help on what the commands are, but basically new to create a new project. There's info to get info on an existing project. There's start to start the debugging. We're going to take a long look at that. And there's package. And then there's the update command if you want to update to a later version of the underlying API. Now, another thing that you're going to have to do is there's a one-time operation where you have to install a certificate on your development machine. And the way to do that is you call this command PBIVIZ -- install.cert. Now, I've already done it. You don't have to do it once per project. You just have to do it once per machine. And the idea is it allows you to have a local debugging session through https://localhost. Now, once you install the certificate by calling PBIVIZ install cert, what's going to happen is there's a process that then has you install a certificate. And the end of the process, you're going to be manually prompted to go through some dialogues. If you take the hands-on lab, and once again, the resource for the hands-on lab is something that we have for you. You're going to be able to go and kind of have step-by-step instructions how to get through this. Okay, but let's say that now I've kind of done the setup. I've installed the developer tools. I've gone through the process of creating the certificate. And so now I don't have to do that each time I create a new project. And we've just created this new project inside there. So once we've created the new project, we open up with Visual Studio Code. So let's talk about the top level files. So there's a Package.json file, which is not really Power BI specific, but that is a node.js standard file which tells what packages are part of this project. Okay, there's the PBIVIZ.json file, and that's definitely specific to custom visual development. And it's basically the manifest, for your custom visual project. We'll look at that. There's the capabilities.json. We're not going to see that to the second half of our talk today, but you define things like data roles, data mappings, custom properties, are all defined in the capabilities.json file. And then a couple low-level nerdy things like the tsconfig and tslint file, which basically control the TypeScript code that you write, its compilation and its linting, as you build your finished project and package it up. Now, with the package.json file, if you open that up, once again, if I step back over here to my project and I go to the package.json file and we open that up, I can see exactly what version of D3 they automatically include. You can also see that here is the Visuals API. So note that if you have the most recent version of the tools and you create a new project, this is what you get, version 2.6.1. There are more recent versions of the API, for instance, right here, one of the things I might want to do, if on the off chance I have used some of the features that are only available in the later API, I'm going to say npm, I'm going to say install, and after install, there's the name of the package, and install has to be spelled correctly. And then if I want it to get the very latest version, I can say install Power BI Visuals API latest. Let's look at the before, 2.6.1. Let's now go ahead and run this right here. And what we should see is that it goes through and now it's giving me the very latest version. So now I'm using the very latest version of the API. Okay, but you can see what are the other things that we're using inside this project. I'm not going to use jQuery, but let's say I did want to use jQuery and I came back up here and said npl install. And now we can specify jQuery. And once again, Ted's got to learn how to spell. Let's go ahead and install that right here. And what you're going to see is, by running these npm install commands, which are second nature if you've done much with Node.js, but are new to you if you're new to this style program, is basically the way we manage the packages, inside of our projects. Now, if I move over to the PBIVIZ project, okay, this is a JSON file. Let me do the Shift Alt F to basically make it look a little bit more reasonable. So you have the name. That's a programmatic identifier, has to be unique. The display name obviously is going to be what someone sees when they see your visual in the visualizations list. You have this GUID, which is kind of weird the way it evolved. GUID's no longer a good name, but it's kind of the name they put in front of your package when you build it. I'm just going to leave that there. There's the visual class name. I can put in things like description, support URL. Notice that they also have the API here. And note that this really isn't looked at. The API version being inside of this manifest is really an artifact of things worked earlier, and you can kind of ignore it. But other things that are important is the author, the assets. Another thing I have to call out is that externals.js was used in an earlier version of the tool set as the way that you would add in extra libraries like jQuery. It's no longer needed, and I'm just going to go ahead and delete that right there. And it'd be kind of nicer if they took it out of the tool set, but just wanted to kind of point that out. Okay, so now you've seen those two different files. Now, some of the other things that we're going to see, inside here is that what are the source files that we have? So there is the main file in the source directory, which is visual.ts. So that's basically your visual. It has a TypeScript class definition. You have settings.ts, and that basically is a helper class, which is optional to use, but it helps you manage the properties behind a visual and serialize them and deserialize them, in and out of the metadata format. And then there's also a visual.less file, which basically has CSS rules. Okay, now when we author a custom class, let's go back here. And once again, we're going to drill down here. I'm going to open up visuals.ts. Okay, here's this big long thing that we have in here. Let's kind of get rid of that. In fact, what I think I'm going to do is let's go ahead and kind of reduce this down to, almost the minimum class definition to start out with. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everybody or all the code inside there. And this style of coding, once again, is popular if you've worked with node.js with something like the SharePoint framework or Angular or React. But the idea is that we have to import types, from other modules. And so we import Power BI, from this one particular package. And then what you can see is we take Power BI.extensibility, and we're able to kind of import things, on a type by type basis. Now, you could just do a import star from Power BI, but that's going to pull in a lot of code. And so one of the big advantages of only asking for the types you need is during the compilation process, it only pulls the parts from that library that it needs, and it can basically make your distributable file a lot smaller. Okay, in just a second, we'll talk about this. It's not just importing TypeScript code, but you can actually import styles as well. Okay, and then you can see that a visual is a TypeScript class, and it inherits from iVisual. Okay, the default name of the class is visual. You can change that, so that's not required. But the only thing to note is if you change the name here, let's go to PBIVIZ.json. We better change the name here as well, because this file kind of tracks the entry point into your visual, and that is, the TypeScript class. Now, in this case right here, what you can see is that we have two different members. We basically have a constructor, and we have a public update method. So the idea is that when your visual gets created on a page, the constructor will run one time. And in this case right here, we want to do a very simple hello world. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the options parameter handed to me. And one of the things that I get as a custom visual instance, okay, now I'm pretending to be a custom visual instance, but in the constructor, they pass me an options object. And if I say .element, that gives me the DOM element of the div that I'm going to live within. Okay, and some of the things I can do is do direct updates to that. Now, in this very simple example, we're going to simply take that target div and set the inner HTML property to something. Okay, now, what we're going to do here is we're going to take this visual and basically test it. So the way that we do that is we call something which is PBIVIZ start. So once again, as you're doing this style of development, you're going to be working with the command line. So in Visual Studio Code, you're going to bring up the terminal. And now inside the terminal, we're going to type a command, and the one to kind of start the project in the debugger, is PBIVIZ start. So let's go back here. Let's do a PBIVIZ start. And now that I've gotten the PBIVIZ start running, we should basically see that it's not going to give me any compilation errors. It's going to go through and do the right thing. And by the time we get to the end here, what we should see is that the terminal should have something that kind of pauses, and that's when we kind of know the debugger is up and running. Now, while that's going, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to navigate to my test environment in Power BI. Could be your production environment. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to a particular report. And it really doesn't matter what report you go to. What matters is that you turn this developer switch on. So in Power BI, I'm going to go to settings, and under settings, there is going to be another settings. Okay, so settings/settings. And when I get here, this is kind of my tenant-wide setting for my user account. I'm going to go to the developer tab, and this is not going to be checked off, but you're going to go ahead and click apply. Now, once you have done that, now what we're going to do is we're going to go and find a report, and either you can open an existing report in edit mode, or what I find a lot easier is just go to a data set and create a brand new report. And what we're going to see here in the visualizations pane is that there is this developer visual. Okay, so going more slides forward. So what you kind of saw is that I started the project. With the project started, we then went to Power BI and we enabled that setting. So when I'm in edit or create report mode, I see the developer visual. And now we're just going to add that developer visual to the page. So let's go ahead and add that inside here. So I click it, there's my developer visual. Let me go ahead and make it a little bit easier to see right here. So we have this little thing which is called the toolbar, which is for the developer inside. And one of the things to note, let's go back and take a look at my code. And what I want you to see is that the constructor has run, because we can kind of see the visual element inside there, but we haven't run, update very many times, but now as I start, moving this around, what we should see is that, things are going to start moving, in terms of I can now go back here. If I wanted to, I could set a breakpoint and fall in. The other thing that we might want to do is let's go to update and do a console.log. And when update fires, it passes me this options object. So if I go back here, and now it might be easier if I kind of collapse these. And now I'll do a Control-Shift-I to bring up the Chrome developer tools. We'll go to the console, and you can kind of see, each time that, that visual update runs, it passes me this object that has data views and, the update ID, and it kind of gives me the viewport. So it tells me exactly, how much, width and height that I have. Back here, you can kind of see that, okay, update just ran, and I was able to kind of find out what the viewport is. Okay, now we're going to go a little bit further here. So another thing about this demo is I want to show you that you don't have to stop things just because you're editing code. Okay, so back here, let's go back to Visual Studio, and let's put a different implementation of update in place. So for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little table here. And I'll create one row with two different cells, and I'll take options.viewport.width. Now, when I save, so I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say File, Save. I want you to kind of see that it automatically triggers the rebuilding of our package during development. So I should now be able to go back here and click on this little reload. Hey, and there's my code inside there. Also, if you're going to be making a lot of changes, you can go ahead and click on this toggle auto reload. So you don't have to click refresh. It recognizes when you've done a rebuild. So let's say that we go back here. And now, I want to make some kind of a change like dot to fixed. And we'll kind of put 2 digits in place right there. So I want to get a specific type of precision. So I'll go ahead and I'll make my changes to the code. And now I'll type Control S to save. Down below, you can kind of see that things are moving there. And then if we come back, to the browser here, you saw that the code automatically fired in. Okay, now.
Hi, Ted. We got a question from the chat, if you don't mind. So it says, I am starting with D3 and I have not yet connected with Power BI. I would like to know if I can create a button inside a visual object that sends a Boolean value to any database.
There are development ways you could do it. It's a little bit of an off-topic question. So generally, your visuals, can call out to things. It's not really meant to give you, some component like you would have in Angular, where you can create any type of conversation with a backend system. So most of the things that you generally are going to be able to do is call gets, but not posts. But generally, if you're trying to kind of create, things like that in a custom visual, it might not be the correct task, to put inside of a custom visual. Using something like Power Apps, in combination with Power BI Report might be a better tool, or using Power BI embedding, where you can have a complete development experience, outside the report, would also give you much better control for something like that. Okay, so thanks for that question. Now,
yeah, and we'll address a few more questions at the end. I think in the next section, I think Ted's going to pause for some, but let's keep going for now.
Yeah, okay, let's get going with this hello world. But what I now want to do is we've got this visual that has a table. So let's go back to our project right here. And inside of our project, what we're going to do now is we've been working with the visual.ts file. Let's go to the style folder, and there's the visual.less file. So if you haven't worked with less files, they're like CSS files, except they have more flexible syntax for creating variables and nesting rules, that's not supported in direct CSS. But the idea, is just like TypeScript gets compiled into JavaScript, less files get compiled into CSS that's understood by the browser. So I went and I made a change to that visual.less file. Once again, I'll save. And just like the TypeScript file, when I make a change to the less file and save it, it automatically runs. And then back here, hey, look what we have. We have something where now, we can control the color that we have. Let's go ahead and switch that to something a little bit more, I don't think I can find salmon, but at least we can do light pink inside there. Okay, now, what I want to now do is we're going to take one more step in this intro demo. And the idea here is that when my visual, is controlled by some other user and they make the visual small or they make the visual big, I need to adjust what I'm doing to fit whatever real estate that I'm given. So this gets to be kind of the art of creating custom visuals, because some people just have a knack for this and other people struggle to really understand the concept. So let's go back here. Let's go back to our visual. And so I'm going to go ahead and replace the update method. And what I'm going to replace it with is something that basically is going to find the scale, for the width and height. And we can just do that by looking at the viewport and the width and height. And so here, we're going to scale the size of our font. And here in my table, pretty low tech, but just trying to illustrate the basic concept of, let's go ahead and, make a change right here. And so, now that I've done that, let's go ahead and take our visual and make it bigger, make it smaller. And once again, we're kind of adjusting, to make sure, we can get the kinds of things that we want inside there. Okay, now let's go through one more exploration of just kind of creating something from scratch. And so what I'm going to do here is we're going to start with covering D3. So let's take this existing file and start again. And this time I'm going to do a import star from D3. Okay, so now that we've done that, this example is going to show you working with a D3 library. The D3 library is the most commonly used library for building visualizations because it builds SVG objects in an automated fashion. Now, here, there is going to be this SVG root. Now, once I kind of create the root, which is the SVG that the other objects are going to go inside, we're going to create a ellipse text, well, have some padding inside there. And what you can see here is, in the constructor, the first thing that we do is we go to the D3 library and say D3 select, and I'm going to basically wrap the options element. So that's kind of like the jQuery selection function. And this basically creates a D3 wrapper, and I'm going to say append this new SVG file inside there. Okay, now let's fill out the constructor a little bit more. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take this constructor, and I'm going to not just initialize that SVG root, but now let's create an ellipse object. Let's go ahead and create an SVG text object inside here. Okay, and now that we've done that, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and update the update method. So this time, and when I implement update, what you can see here is that the first thing you generally want to do is take that SVG root and basically just set its width and height to the viewport. Because if your SVG root is bigger than the viewport that you're getting for the visual, things are going to be clipped. Okay, now once we've done that, now it's just kind of once again, the art of creating a custom visual, is how are you going to do your rendering? So what we're going to do right here is let's just kind of have some kind of common approach. And so what we'll do is we'll take our SVG root and we'll just change its size to the size of the viewport. And while it's not required, I find it very handy to create some type of a plot, which is an object variable telling you X offset, Y offset, width and height. And then we're going to change the ellipse, things like, where it's placed, what its width, what its height. We'll do some more font scaling as well. And so now that we've done this inside here, you can kind of see what we've done is we've kind of created the hello world D3. And once again, if you go through the lab, we're going to kind of teach you to work with this. And right here, you can kind of see, as you make it bigger, as you make it smaller, once again, we should adjust to it. Okay, now, mind you, we haven't moved into a very important topic, which is how to start rendering the data behind your visual, but we've just kind of gotten up and going, with the visualization library, and that's one of the key points I wanted to get across in this first demo. Okay, so at this point, we can take a couple questions. I'm not sure if you want to do the same thing. Do you want to address the questions?
Sure, yeah, we have a question for you. Let's see. I did the tutorials early, Jurgen says, but used VS and it worked. Could you later explain again why to use VS Code? What's the advantage?
Yeah, I'm just going to give that a short one, and that is that Visual Studio doesn't understand the node.js folder structure as well as it should. And it has proprietary files that just go against the grain. So Microsoft really started Visual Studio Code, for my opinion, with the expressive desire to create the best environment, for Node.js style development. And they've been trying to add some things to Visual Studio, to make it more acceptable. But once you've gone to Visual Studio Code, you're going to find, to me, it's very clumsy to try to kind of do the things that I could do in Visual Studio Code with Visual Studio 2019 or 2017. And certainly, that is a matter of opinion. I can't state that as fact, but I can just say that, what Microsoft built the tool for, was node.js development when you're using Visual Studio Code. Okay. Is there another
Great.
one, Daniel?
Yeah, we have another one. How do I create an area chart with a gradient fill?
D3. We're going to look at kind of creating some charts right here. And, one of the things that you'll see is that you have to get good at D3, to work with those gradient fills. Okay.
I have one more if you have time for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I think someone wanted to know, is clocking possible in Power BI report server?
Yeah, I think we're just going to take that one offline. Report
Sure.
server is not really in the scope of this.
Sounds great.
Okay. So let's go ahead and now move into the next section. So what we want to look at is visual capabilities. I'm also going to move over to a different sample. Okay, so here we'll go ahead and close out the folder for the project we were working on. And note that all the samples that I'm going to show quite a few samples quickly, are in the sample code for this. So if we go back to here, DevCamp and custom visuals, this one is one big number. I'm going to open this up. And so with this sample right here, what we're going to see is that there is this capabilities file right here. And so we want to kind of take a look at what are data roles and what are data mappings. Okay, so visual capabilities is the file where we define three important things: data roles, and data roles define what fields the users can add into your visual. Data mappings is going to set up how the data gets structured for access by your code. And then object we'll talk about in the next section, which is for defining custom properties. So let's start with data roles. So let's say I wanted to create a bar chart. I create two data roles, bar grouping and bar measurement. And the idea is that when you create a data role, you are kind of creating a well in the visualizations list that someone can then take either a measure or a column and drop it into that particular list. Now, you'll also note that there is this idea of a type, or should have called it type, but they call it kind. So grouping means column, and obviously measure means measure. So the idea is that if you say measure, and they drop a column inside there, it's going to automatically get wrapped with an aggregate function. If you say grouping, it needs a row context, so you're not going to be able to drop a measure in there. You can have a combination, both. Also, what we're going to see is there's constraints. So we can also define how many fields you can put inside there. So when I create a data role, I want to say the user can put 2 or more fields in here, or I might want to say the user can only put 1 field into my data role. Now, you create the data roles so users can configure what fields they're going to give to basically feed your visual with data. Now we have to pick a mapping. So there's several different mappings, and every time we create a visual, we pick one. So the first demo we're going to look at here is going to be single mapping. It's basically going to be a single value. So really, we just want one measure put inside there. There's also a table mapping, and I'll do a demo on that. And then the most common one that we'll look at, is definitely more complicated than the first two, called categorical. And that's what you use to create most of the Cartesian charts. There are 2 more advanced ones, matrix and tree, that we're not going to be able to get into. I just wanted to call out, that they do exist. Now, let's go back. And here's this data role of my single value, and we're going to have a measure, and we can have conditions. So notice that there's this name, my role, and up here I can say it has a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 1. So if you give me 0, it's not valid. Once you give me 1, the UI won't allow you to add any more. And you can kind of see we've chosen single there. Now, if you're going to be using my examples, remember, before you can run PBIVIZ, you're going to have to do a npm install, basically to make sure all the packages get downloaded to your machine where you are doing your testing. And once you basically run install right here, then you should just be able to do a PBIVIZ start and basically get things up and running inside there. Okay, we'll give this one more second to finish up. Okay, and now that we've done the PBIVIZ install, or the npm install, PBIVIZ start, and note that the whole time I've just had my report in here. Note that when I stop and start again, the visual gets confused. But I should be able to start this up again. One other thing that I'll do, if I ever change from one visual type to another, I will definitely delete the developer visual, and put a new instance of it in. Okay, and now what you can see is over here we have values. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up into sales. That's one of my fact tables here with all my measures. And I'm going to take sales revenue and I'm going to pull this inside here. And, once I have done that, and okay, let's see, it's acting a little bit strange there. Let me go ahead and try it one more time. Okay, why? And if it's acting weird, I'm just going to give this whole page a refresh. And sometimes when you have a page and it's loaded for a while, the JavaScript gets all out of whack. So let's see if we go back here. Also make sure your compiler or your debugging session is properly started. And now we'll go back here. We'll add the developer visual. We'll go back. We'll find revenue and we'll add it inside here. And now it's going to work like it should. Okay. Now here, what you're going to see is we've got this visual. And if I go kind of take a look at things, there's this really cool thing, which is called the developer visual data view. So if I go back here, let me call out the third button over here says show data view. I'm going to switch over to show data view. Hard to see here. So I'm going to also come down here and say switch to actual size. But now what I can do is I can drill down and you can see that single has something behind it because I use single mapping. If I use table mapping, table would have something behind it, but not single. Now, once again, single is very simple. So it has a value. And then there's the column metadata where you can get things like the display name. Also, you have the formatting. So let's go back here. And what I want to show you here is that here we have sales revenue and we've got the right formatting on it. What's going to happen if I move from something that has currency formatting to something that just has the comma separator? I need to be able to make sure that I read the formatting instruction from that measure and format it before it's shown. Okay. And once again, if I go back over here, I'm not going to spend much more time on this demo because I have some other demos to move to. But note down here that you can kind of see in the object model, in update, you have this data view that's passed to you. And the data view .single.value, will basically give you that value. You also have data view.metadata.columns.0. And here's how you get things like the display name, or I want to get the format string. Notice that with this visual right here, we've also got some custom properties. And the idea of the custom properties is, do you want to show the name in addition to showing the value? I want to give the user the option to kind of turn that on or off or make something bold. Okay, so what we have here, is getting the display name because I might want to show that to the user. Now, there's also the formatting. And what I want to do is kind of point to the different demos I'm giving you as kind of where you can kind of see the code to start. But there is an extra Node.js package, which is Power BI Visuals Utils, formatting utils. And so that gives you this ability to create this formatter. And the idea is once you create the formatter and you give it that format value, it's able to kind of give you a string, that takes that number, and puts the proper formatting in place. Okay, let's say I want to do something else. I want a Snazzy table. So here is an example where I have data roles and I just need values. Let's go back here and just to kind of show if anyone's interested, in some of these other samples, let me go ahead and close this down. Once I have closed that down, I'm now going to swap over here to our Snazzy table. And with the Snazzy table, I am going to run the npm install. And if you don't have a lot of time, you can type npm I instead of npm install. But once this gets downloaded, all the different packages, I should be able to just kind of run this. Now, this time with capabilities, what we're going to do is we're going to say DataView mappings. We're going to take this values data role. This is just like the built-in table. And the idea is we want to allow you to add, multiple ones in, but not an unlimited number. So we're going to allow you to add 5. Now, if I go ahead and we do a PBIVIZ start on this, what we're going to see here is that I just have some very simple code, and I wanted to do one demo that doesn't use D3, but basically just kind of does this with jQuery. And what you're going to see here is, inside of update, we're going to be able to kind of find the table data. Now, let's go back here. Let's go ahead and add in the developer visual. And now we'll go to customers and we'll add in sales region. And now that we've added in sales region, okay, I've confused it again. I'm just going to do a hard refresh. Okay, and now once again, we will add the developer visual. And now in our case right here, we're going to take sales region and add that to values, right? And now let's go up here and, we can add 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, but once you get up to 5, you're going to find that, that's all it's going to allow you to add inside there. And okay, for some reason, this is not working the way that I wanted to. Okay, but the idea here is that, with the table mapping, you're able to kind of just walk through a set of rows and columns. And for each column, you can find the metadata, what's the column name, what's the formatting code, and then you're kind of on your own to kind of build out the rows. Now, there's 2 demos I wanted to kind of spend some time on, and both are kind of getting more advanced into creating a bar chart. So if I go back here, and what I want to do here is this time, we're going to open up the bar chart. Once again, this is all samples that I wrote. I wanted you to be able to, download them and try them out. And they're just written to teach people. Let's do a PBIVIZ start here. And so this time, if we look at the capabilities, what you can see here is that I'm using categorical. So what I want to do is I want to create a bar chart. And so we have bar category and bar measurement. Now, once I run this thing, I'm just going to wait for a couple more seconds for it to finish loading in. Once we're able to do that, we'll go back here. Maybe I'll just give a refresh right now, just so this is ready for the demo. And so back over here, let's go ahead and create this visual. And now what you can see is there's bar category and bar measurement. So for the measurement, we'll take sales revenue. For the products, we'll take category. Okay, and now we've kind of got a bar chart here. Now, some of the things that I'm going to point out is that we have 2 different roles back here. One is grouping, one is measure, and then we've created a categorical mapping inside here. Now, if I go over to the visual.ts file, here we're kind of creating, a more traditional Cartesian visual. And so what gets to be very common, is that we're going to create a view model. So each data point, is going to have a category and it's going to have a value. And then what's the other kind of high level? Well, is the data model valid yet? What are the data points? So here you can kind of see that we have an array of these data point objects. There's other things that we want to track inside here, but the idea now is that when it's time to go ahead and build this, we have this dedicated method called create view model. So it's going to look at the data view. Is it valid? Yes or no? If not, don't do anything. But if it is valid, here is how we can go in and get things like the category column. Here's how we get category names and values. Now, if we go back here, once again, I kind of encourage you to get more familiar. Let's go back to actual size. Let's now go back over to this data view. And the best way, and the way I learned how to deal with this, is I'm dealing with categorical mapping. So load in the visual and go into the DataView Explorer. And now, there are my values. And once again, let's drop down the values. Great. What are the categories, that we're looking at inside here? And you can see kind of the values for each category and, other things about, what is the source that these are from. Okay, so once again, being able to kind of get at that metadata and understand, makes it easier for you to kind of write this code. Okay, now I know I'm kind of got about 5 minutes left. So one of the things that you might want to create, is custom properties. And the way that you create custom properties starts with the capabilities.json file. You're able to define the properties inside there. And once you've done that, there's this helper class, which is the DataView objects parser. And this is the thing that allows us to kind of go in and persist settings. Now, in this example over here, let's kind of see what these settings look like. Okay, so now let's go back here. I'll fit this to the page. And then for my custom visual, I'll go to the format pane. And what you can see is I've got the properties for my visual. Maybe I want the, the x-axis font to be bigger. So now, we can allow the user, to, crank up the size inside there, and we should see those, values put inside. Also, some of the other things that we might want is, do we want someone to be able to go to our bar chart and change some type of a color of what's behind there. Okay, now I've defined these properties. And so generally the approach that we use is, first of all, we define the properties as a child of a named object. So our object is named bar chart properties. Think of that as the property section. And then you're going to create this helper class, and you're going to make sure that you create your class name and your inner field names with the exact same names, because there's serialization code that's able to kind of look through that. And once again, if I go back here, and now we kind of switch over to this mode, and let's go back into actual size. Once you have custom properties, they're not going to be under the categorical mapping, but they're always under metadata. So we look under metadata, and I created this custom object, and there it is. Bar chart properties. And then I go down here and I see X font size and bar chart. And I can basically dig in and see those properties. And one thing to note is that you don't see the property values persisted in the metadata unless you move them away from their default value. So if you go and look at it and you don't see it, it's because you haven't changed anything yet. So the idea, is if I now kind of come through here and I change a property or change the, one of these particular properties, that is now going to be the thing, that tweaks this. Here's metadata, here are objects, and now sort by size is in there because it's no longer at the default property. Okay. Now, just have a couple of minutes left, and I've kind of talked about retrieving properties. There is an advanced topic, and I have that kind of working with the last visual that I think I've run out of time to demo. But the idea is that by default, your custom visual will not support highlighting. Highlighting is when someone clicks on, let's say we have states like we have here, and in one of the built-in Microsoft visuals like bar chart, someone clicks on a state. All the visuals that support highlighting won't filter the other states. They'll keep them there, but they'll do some type of an effect to kind of show what is in the selected region, and we're going to dim out the things that are not in the selected region. But supporting highlighting first requires going to capabilities.json and basically saying, I want to support it, but then you also have to add code. And the way the code works is that in addition to giving you the data points, they give you another array called highlights that either have the value or they're null. So you basically have to enumerate through this array and see if the highlights array support, has a value, or, whether we're just going to see it as a non-highlighted value. Last thing I want to talk about before we quit is when it's time to package a visual, it gets to be pretty straight ahead. Let's say that back here, inside of my project, it's time to go ahead and package up my visual. So all we really have to do is PBIVIZ, and we'll go ahead and give it the package command. And what you're going to see, as you build this particular package right here, in your current project, there's a dist folder. And after the packaging process, is complete, what we should see here, if we open this up, I'm gonna have to wait just another second or two, is that we should basically see that it has produced, basically it's a zip archive that has a PBIVIZ extension. Okay, this is taking a couple seconds. Let's see, does it know that I'm in a hurry? I guess it doesn't. But the idea here is that when you want to package, basically you're able to run the PBIVIZ package command, and it's able to basically take all the code you've written, all the TypeScript code, and all the CSS styles in your less file, and put them all, into a very small packet for distribution. Okay, here what you can see, is that it's created these files. Now, if I go to the PBIVIZ JSON file, and that's where this kind of GUID thing comes in, let's go ahead and get rid of that name, make it a little bit easier to kind of read. And now what we should see, as we run this, it will build that PBIVIZ file with a better name. And just for one small thing at the end here, let's say that we go down, inside of one of these visual projects, and we go into distribution. This is what we could upload, or this is what we could import into Power BI Desktop. But if I now take this and simply give the extension a different extension, now I can open it up as a zip archive. But what you can see is that there's simply a resources folder, and it just has one big file with JSON, and one of the properties in that JSON file is all the JavaScript, and another property, is going to be all the less files. Okay, so anyway, the last slide I have here is once you've created a PBIVIZ file with your custom visual, you can import it into Power BI Desktop, and then just ship the PBIX file off, and the custom visual travels with it. For companies that have created their own custom visuals, you can also have the Power BI admins upload the PBIVIZ file to the organizational visuals gallery. And there's the option to make it available if you look for it in Power BI Desktop or in the browser, or there's another option to make it always show anytime you create a new report inside there. Okay, so we went through a lot of stuff. Maybe we'll take time for questions. The last thing I want to point out is next month, our next Power BI Dev Camp session is going to revisit Power BI embedding, and we're going to use the latest and greatest, the .NET 5 platform, and go through working with Service Principal to implement app owns data embedding. So at this point, I think we'll just kind of open up for all the different questions that we might have.
Okay, hi Ted. I think we are out of time for questions, and so asking if you're able to address those questions, let's copy and paste them in your blog on the community.
I can absolutely do that.
Thank you, Ted. We so much appreciate everything you put together for the community. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We appreciate you spending the time with us because you can spend it with anybody. And we love that you spent it with us at Power BI and learning Power BI together. Ted, why don't you post the link to your blog in the chat here and just let folks know they can look forward to you answering those questions there. I think you'll copy paste them and then take the conversation there. Yes.
Okay, I'll use the Power BI community blog.
Excellent.
I'm one of those rare people that doesn't have their own blog. I use other people's blogs. Anyway, in the community blog, we'll get the questions and answers there to you over the next couple of days. So thanks everyone for attending, and good luck with your custom visual development.
Thank you, everyone. And Daniel, thank you so much for producing today.
Thank you, Daniel.
My pleasure. Thanks for everyone for joining.